Welcome to episode 23 of Poetry Worth Hearing, hosted by me, Kathleen McPhillamy, and with music by Alex Heen. In this episode, we have an interview with Palestinian poet Ruba Abughaida, who talks about her poetry and reads from her own work and from poets who have influenced her. The theme for this episode is struggle, and while the struggle in the Middle East is patent in Ruba's poetry, struggle can be political, personal, implicit or explicit, and make its appearance in poetry in many different ways. Here we have poems from Lizzie Ballagher, Fiona Perry, Jones, Alison Jones, Elizabeth Barton, Sarah J Bryson, Helen Overell, and Kate Young. The episode finishes with a reading by Michael Bartholomew-Biggs from his latest collection, Identified Flying Objects. Ruba Abughaida is half Palestinian and half Lebanese. She began writing poetry, in English, when she joined the undergraduate creative writing class at Oxford, taught by Jenny Lewis. She now writes in English and Arabic, poetry and fiction. You will find more information and details of her publications on poetryworthhearing.biz.
This is a recent poem that was written as the world witnessed the horrific events taking place in Gaza that are unfortunately continuing to unfold and have spilled over into countries in the region as well. And it's called Things We Need to Witness. We found our cause, took our cue from the children, bounced from shattered home to bombed out school, shining a dark light on us as witnesses to the harsh glare of news cycles. Where else can a 7-year-old teach courage in this way other than Palestine? The world becomes unfastened. We cannot breathe, although we stand in the wind. Here we gather in our hands wild thyme picked from Jenin. There we press olives carried from Gaza, taste honey spun from the beehives of Jericho. We remember the fig trees, recite the poems of Fadwa Khan, listen to the rhymed and measured words, sing along with Julia Butros, leaning on the melody of southern Lebanon, slip through the harmony to feel the anchor of the sun, warm like the brave that bleed through their press armor. Any day now, we will stop saying goodbye. The second poem is called 12 Tones from Yemen to Palestine, and it's really the story of my ancestors' migration from Yemen to Palestine. They stopped in various places along the way, but one city that we know they stopped at is called Hasbaya, and it's in the south of Lebanon. Some of them settled there, remained there, converted, changed their religion because that's primarily a Druze town. And some continued on to Palestine, including my great-grandfathers and grandfathers' ancestors. I am the songs of the clan that traveled from Yemen to Palestine, rhythms of a lineage that remains, moving along musical scales strummed on the strings of oud in a perfect fourth, a fifth, quarter tones and half flats hovering in patterns leading to Haifa. They pass through Hasbaya, Mount Hermon rising from its soil in greeting. I imagine them at the citadel, watered by the river and the silver green olive trees. Some travelers remained and converted until they spoke with a new accent, soft as the spring curled leaves. She rode on, the name to her family. Palestine became the melody, golden as the honey swarmed with bees, deep in humming caves, stretched towards the one from which the first words of a holy book were spoken, bringing a prophet to his knees to tremble, ripping past the spidered web woven across the rocky opening to spread the word. Harmony, murmuring a beat into the roots, lifting up towards the sun, revealing bounty to the light. Hundreds of years on, I am free from searching for words to describe exile. Born of this history, I wear a sacred blanket woven from truth of ancestors. So this poem is called 36 Abbas Street, and it is the address of the home that my grandfather built for his family and his brother's family in Haifa, which is the city that we're from. They were forced to leave in 1948 with the occupation, but always believed that they would return. They continued to hold the keys to the house. They were never able to return. My father was born in that house. The house was then illegally confiscated, divided into apartments, and sold off to various people. The Israeli government claimed that the house had been abandoned, which it, of course, had not been. My family still hold the deeds, and it still stands in Haifa today. 36 Abbas Street. The deeds still have his name, decades after the house was stolen. The orders came to leave. Two uncles pulled off the wicker wood chairs they sat on each evening at the front stoop of the house, in observation, in contemplation of scores of armies clearing out people, orchards, to seize and settle on their offerings. It had all been arranged, foretold by prophets. From the Helmand to the Euphrates, the rulers went to work. Take nothing but clothes, they told them. But she packed a heap of photos pulled from the walls. The house closes in on us still. We hang on its stories like fruit from the lemon trees outside its stones. I got into poetry when I started the undergraduate diploma in creative writing at Oxford University. I applied and started fully intending to be a novelist. I did not think of poetry being anywhere near the kind of writing that I wanted to do. I hadn't written a poem probably since I was 8 years old. But all of that changed when I walked into Jenny Lewis's class. And she's a wonderful tutor. I'm very lucky to call her a friend. She's certainly a mentor. And she recognized or saw something that I hadn't known about. I loved that class, and I threw myself into it with, passion that surprised even me. And that's how my journey into poetry began. At that point, I was writing in English because I was studying in English. And things changed later on for me in that I stopped writing in English and only wrote in Arabic. This latest collection is actually the first that I've written in English in several years, I would say over 5 years. From being in Jenny's class, I then met Adnan al-Sayed, the Iraqi poet, and the three of us embarked on this wonderful journey of translation that has certainly enriched my life, enriched my poetry. Again, it was all due to Jenny giving me the confidence to believe that I could do it. I did not believe I could translate. I said to her, I'm not a translator. But what does being a translator mean, really? I have a strong command of Arabic, strong command of English, and it's something that went on for several years over several projects that we translated together. And I'm very grateful for that opportunity.
I wondered if there were any English poets that you had been attracted to.
There were several, yes. I mean, clearly Jenny Lewis's poetry, T.S. Eliot, Mary Oliver, Carol Ann Duffy, the Pablo Neruda, obviously not writing in English, but I read him translated into English. There are so many, too many to even mention, but yes, sorry.
And when you were translating from Arabic, because Adnan is Iraqi, and is there a difference in the Arabic? And did it make a difference to you?
Well, I'm half Palestinian, half Lebanese. And no, because written Arabic is uniform across the Arab world. So it's very different than spoken Arabic, where we have different dialects depending on which country you're from, which area in that country that you're from. But written classical Arabic happens to be the same across all those countries.
You said you've written quite a lot of poetry in Arabic. Has that been published or translated? And have you translated it?
Yes, I translated the poetry pamphlet, Paths and Passageways, into Arabic. So it's also published in Arabic by Albion Beatnik Press. I then spent the next 5 or so years writing a book of poetry in Arabic called The Forgotten Queens, based on a nonfiction book by a Moroccan author called Fatim al-Marnisi, who wrote several books, and one of them was called The Forgotten Queens of Islam. And it is the story of queens in the Islamic world, ranging from India to Egypt to the Maldives to Yemen, all of this history that actually isn't taught to us and isn't very well known. And I just loved that book. I read and reread it and thought, I have to write about these queens and I have to put their lives to poetry. So I've spent several years working on that book, and it's about to be published now by Bisan Publishers in Lebanon.
And are you going to translate it?
Oh, I don't know is the answer. I thought I would. It's taken many years of my life, and it was actually very difficult to leave the Queens after I was done with it. For years, they would never let up. They would never leave me alone. And I just thought, when will I be done with you? Although I loved them. And now I think I need a little break before thinking about whether I could go back into that world and translate them or work with somebody else with the translation. Poetry to me is about bringing things to the surface that perhaps others are feeling or not able to say, do not know about. And in this case, the history of these queens. I feel it's very important, as someone who's Palestinian and Lebanese, to tell our stories. I think everyone who tells their story from the region is doing us a great service. And many of these stories are not heard in the West, are hidden, are not available to people. And I think it's very important to be telling them.
When you went back to writing in Arabic, were there Arabic writers or poets who were important to you?
Yes. And I don't know that I would say I went back to writing in Arabic, because the truth is I never really wrote in Arabic. Growing up in Kuwait and Cyprus and then Canada, we were in schools where English was the dominant language, although in Kuwait, Arabic was there as well, but English was certainly dominant. It wasn't in my house. My parents were very clear about that. They instilled a really strong love of language and culture and land in us. And they only spoke to us in Arabic at home, which I think saved us. And so I had never really ventured into that world. But after I completed my undergrad diploma in Oxford, I then went on to do an MSc in creative writing at Cambridge. And there, I was asked the question several times by my tutors and by the students with me in class about, well, if Arabic is your first language, which it was, because that's what we spoke at home, why don't you write in Arabic? And I was asked that question enough times that I started to think about why I don't write in Arabic. It then became part of a larger social, cultural, political issue for me, because I realized that the effects of colonialism on the Arab world had meant that the language was slowly being erased. It's erased out of schools, it's erased out of life, it's erased because English can be the dominant language on TV, in the media. And I couldn't write in English anymore. To me, that was sort of the time that I just thought, okay, all of this has to stop and I need to start writing in Arabic. I studied with a wonderful tutor, an Iraqi tutor based in the UK, and I studied with my father, who is the best person that I could hope for to work with in Arabic. He's a lover of books. He's an avid reader, as is my mother, and his Arabic language is excellent. So I really started from the beginning. I had the base. We grew up in Kuwait, but I needed to immerse myself in that world. And that's what I did. And it was very difficult at first. It felt like I was learning a new language, because classical written Arabic is not the same as spoken Arabic. The grammar is very, I used to think complicated, but now I just think the most beautiful, intricate grammar of any language that I could work in. And there have been many, many influences. Yes, there are. I couldn't even name all of them, but I mean, if I were just to think of three, it would be Adonis, the Syrian poet. It would be Al-Mutanabbi, the 10th century Arab poet, and Fadwa Tuqan, Palestinian poet, who's also known as the poetess of Palestine.
Are you still writing fiction?
I am writing short stories, but the novel that I thought I was going to write hasn't happened. I don't know if it will.
Do you think your poetry would be very different if you weren't so closely concerned with political issues?
Absolutely, I do. I think at the moment, or for the last few years, I should say, that yes, my poetry happens to be closely intertwined with political, social, cultural issues taking place in the Arab world, particularly, of course, Palestine and Lebanon and Yemen and Iraq and other countries as well. Essentially, really all the countries that have strong resistance movements against occupation and colonialism. But there are immediate political and social needs in the Arab world. And there is a long and wonderful history of Arab poets writing about current issues of their time and reflecting what's going on in society. I think that, unlike other forms of writing, poetry takes that experience deeper and further and into the realm of what cannot be touched or cannot be seen. I write about my experiences. I write about things that I see, that I'm going through, that I'm feeling. And that at the moment happens to be these issues. But I think as a poet, from that unseen and untouched place, you can be a vessel for voicing what others are feeling. And my individual experience is a reflection of the collective experience. I can be in solidarity with my people, with my land, from that metaphysical realm, I feel. And just through exploring all of these experiences and sensitivities, I help give a voice, I think, to a collective experience. I suppose also, yes, I wanted to say that, I was lucky enough to grow up in a house that valued learning and valued literature and poetry and music. And those are things that we discussed as a family. And then I was also lucky enough, my husband loves poetry and writing and is in fact an author of some books himself. And so that has continued even in my family, that we're able to exchange ideas in this way. I still work very closely with my father on editing poems and language and Arabic language. So that's been a joy.
I would love you to read a couple of poems that matter to you.
I'll start with Adonis. He has had a huge influence on my poetry, on my writing, on the books, the poetry books that I read. He was born in 1930 in Syria. So he's been long favored to win the Nobel Prize in Arabic literature. He has seeped his writing in kind of ancient Arabic poetry, and he was guided by his father as a child as well. And he has taken traditional Arabic poetry and merged it into new poetic forms. And he did that in the mid-20th century when the focus was very much on classical and traditional Arabic. Edward Said, the Palestinian critic, writer, academic, has described him as the most daring and provocative Arabic poet. I was lucky enough to meet him at the South Bank in London a couple of years ago. It was a book launch of a translation of his work, and he was just as humble, as interesting, as brilliant as I imagined him to be. I'm going to read a poem that has been translated by Khalid Mutawi, who's a Libyan poet and Arab-American academic. And the poem is called A Mirror for a Question. I asked, and they said, the branch swathed in flame as a sparrow. They told me my face was the waves, the world's face a pile of mirrors, a lighthouse, and the sailor's sorrow. I arrived, and the world in my way was ink, each gesture a phrase. I did not know that between it and me, there was a bridge named brotherhood, made of steps, prophecy, and fire. I did not know that my face was a ship that sails inside a spark. I'd also like to read a poem by Fadwa Khan, who is a Palestinian poet, and she is considered one of the most prominent Palestinian poets. She was born in Nablus in 1917. By the time she died in 2003, she had witnessed many things in Palestine from the occupation onwards. And you could say that she was ahead of her time. She broke social and family structures that she did not agree with. And although she began writing in traditional Arabic poetic forms, she also went on to become one of the pioneers of Arabic free verse. Her work covers feminine explorations of love and social, cultural issues. And she wrote extensively about her life, about nature, about the world around her. This is a poem that I've translated and from Arabic, and it's called Enough for Me. Enough for me to live in the earth, to be buried in her, to sink meltingly into her soil, to vanish, only to spring forth like a flower, brightening the play of my countrymen's children. Enough for me to remain in my native soil's embrace, to be as close as a handful of dirt, a sprig of grass, a wildflower. I would also like to read a poem by Al-Mutanabbi, who is considered by many, and certainly by me, as one of the greatest and most influential Arab classical poets. He was born in Kufa in Iraq in 915. He is said to have started to recite poetry at the age of 9. And he then went on to write about various social, political, and cultural issues as well. There seems to be a theme with the poets that I'm gravitating towards as well. His name actually in Arabic means the would-be prophet. We're not sure exactly why he was given that name, though. Like many at the time, he was a wandering poet. And in 948, he went to the court of Saif al-Dawla in Aleppo, Syria. And there he wrote some of his greatest praise poems for the poet prince. I continue to be in awe of his poetry. I continue to study it. I read him on a daily basis. He has had a significant impact on my Arabic language, my meters, rhymes in poetry, and I think I've learned more from reading him about traditional forms of poetry than any other poet. So this is an excerpt, and it's a short excerpt translated by Marilyn Booth from his poem called For Your Eyes, All My Heart's Seen and Suffers. For your eyes, all my heart seen and suffers. For love, all I've lost or still have. I was not one whose heart passion entered, but seeing your orbs, one must love. And this is certainly a break from the usual poetry that he wrote, which was very much in praise of the ruler of Syria at the time. There were several years later, he fell out with him and wrote poems that were very harsh, criticizing him. They then went on to reconcile, and he wrote poems again in praise of him, in praise of his family, in praise of his mother. So he's had a very, very interesting and fascinating life. So this is a verse from a poem by Adonis called The Passage. This is the English version, and then I'll read the Arabic. I sought to share the life of snow and fire, but neither snow nor fire took me in. So I kept my peace, waiting like flowers, staying like stones. In love, I lost myself. I broke away and watched until I swayed like a wave between the life I dreamed and the changing dream I lived. Here it is in Arabic. الإشارة. مزجت بين النار والثلوج. لن تفهم النيران غاباتي ولا الثلوج. وسوف أبقى غامضا أليفا. أسكن في الأزهار والحجارة. أستقصى. أرى. أموج. كالضوء بين السحر والإشارة.
And, appropriately, those few lines of Arabic bring to an end this interview with Ruba Abughaida. Lizzie Ballagher reads two poems, the first looking at what we have inherited from the geological struggles of massive procontinents millions of years ago. The second is perhaps a memory of struggle, but also of happy times in the city of Derry.
Limestone pavement, Malham Cove. The rift tipped it, seafloor once, ripped rock in steepest upheaval, tilted it back over the shale and slate and sandstone it had stood upon for eons. When continents clashed, it was exposed, reared up, left sparse, spare cliff in a landlocked place. Now it is drained dry, some might say, barren. Clints faulted, fissured by time, by ice, by terminal moraine, by roaring water, pouring for generations across its fractured face, savage, sweeping erosion. Be mindful where you place your feet on the treachery of those breakback slabs. Pause, stop to look into grikes where you may perhaps solve mysteries. Here the limestone bones drought holds lush ferns, diminutive pansies and violets, wood anemones fragile as spring itself in chinks and desert cliffs. Rain falls steadily and forever down, assumes chalk-white cloudiness, drips like milk between these stones. The cove belongs in another age, has never chosen this. The creation of Malham Cove came about when two procontinents, which geologists have named Laurussia and Gondwana, were rammed together by seismic upheavals that took place about 350 million years ago along massive tears in the Earth's crust during the Carboniferous era. Perhaps I never left you. Dirty old town, sang Ewan McCall, conjuring you from my memory, Derry. Oak Tree Place in Ireland, Derry. Your fortress walls were built of Derry schist, with attitudes as hard line as your very stones, while waterside cranes scissored over the oily loch, the docks, while coal smoke overhung grimed sandbags, gritty streets, while soldiers slouched from barracks. Yes, even now, on summer festival days in England, when open pub doors spill out drunks, arms linked, all singing into the street, when the rolling fug of booze and fags follows them out, they make me think of you, old hard-edged Derry. And seagulls, screeching and shrieking, cruising westerlies high over Loch Foyle. They're with me wherever I go now, their splatter on pavements and cars, their beady-eyed spying from roof ridges or the tops of walls graffitied with angry slogans, twisted histories. But oh, Derry, on spring nights just 2 miles away across the border, in blackthorn lanes, under gleaming metal stars and the soft, dark smudge of mountains, there it was in the Donegal lift and lilt of fiddle bows that you beguiled me, called to me from blue-hazed inns where your love songs came hunting for my heart. Though I left you long ago, Derry, I realise when I hear those songs, the wild lament of fiddles, that you, heart of the oak tree, have never left me.
Coincidentally, the next poem by Fiona Perry is set in Belfast, but here the struggle feels much more raw.
This poem was inspired by an event that led to the establishment of the Peace People in Northern Ireland. Every war is an apocalypse, for Anne Maguire. Show us ravaged Belfast. We want to see the soaring yellow giants, tangy rumbling through its streets, graffiti pleas for justice splashed on gable walls, wild bonfires eating up the night. Inform us of your people's sorrows. We wish to know about their prisoner son, their father killed in a car bomb, their disappeared grandmother, their suffering saints trapped in plaster. And now to that fateful day. We have analysed the footage, over and over again, reliving the scene. With heavy hearts, we observed your children move beside you, contained within your mother orbit as a treachery of serpents circled above. We have established our facts. The crown was ripped from your head. Your stars scattered across the pavement. The sun was blotted out. With this, We are closing our case files. Rage is a fortress that must be dismantled. We will sweep up the splintered glass, remove the wrecked car, junior bicycle, pram. And outside the mangled church railings, we will raise up a shrine. Please know our intercessions flow through Riverdale. Soon you will be taken to a safe house where peace resides, a place where galaxies of lost families are known to reconvene.
Guy Jones' first poem confronts homelessness. The second is a more introspective meditation on time.
Not just for Christmas. You can blame it on the force 9 of economic variables forever making unforecast landfall, though to be fair, the signs were there in the isobars from the last time one came to blow our homes away. You can blame it on those who bluster out loaded figures showing, just for the record, that funding is up to support, prevent, yet still jetsam gathers in the doorways, and the barometer swings in the same old direction. You may even blame it on the victims. You won't be the last. You can blame it on who you like. It always happens to other people. After all, there's no such thing as bad weather, just unfortunate clothing. So, collar up against the prevailing. You pass another one, wrapped in shabby unfortunateness, hunkering down below the dew point. Asleep, off his face, worse, and you hold off the nagging thought. I'm only a paycheck away. Time. The first second afterwards hung like the ring of a bell, clear and alive in the air. That's the way it is. 1 second passes away, and with its chime still clinging, the next one lies down on top, like the pages of a book, and makes its own demands. Slowly like this, 1 second on another, a minute passed. The first minute was calm, the second full of regrets, the third of guilt, and then of why. By the end of the first hour, a week had passed, and still the kettle for the doctor's tea had not boiled, nor the ambulance arrived. The doctor made a phone call. He will be late for tea, maybe an hour or so. Love you and the kids. Life goes on. 1 second on another. 1 moment exchanged, but nothing really changed. As though 1 minute is no different from the next, as though all seconds are identical. The ambulance came, and slowly you left. The doctor left as well, and I was alone. I sat and watched the ash in the fire fall, until, to the steady rhythm of time, it grew cold in the grate, and I went to bed. The days now passed like the seconds, one upon another, each one different but mostly about the same. I'd like to say, I don't know how I managed. But it's strange how you adjust to the new incoming second, to each minute and hour and its demands.
An interesting use of sound effects, perhaps reflecting Guy's background in theatre. The next poet is Alison Jones, whose poems explore psychic struggle through the language of the natural world.
The intensity of a walk in the park. If she had allowed a voice, she might have been dangerous. But it has been swallowed to the diamond coal seam depths, flung into a lidded pool, filled with stagnant water's prayers. Sometimes when I take her into my world, she hurries to designate all the things she knows: blackbird, song thrush, daffodil, sweet violet, as if knowing the names for things makes us real and present. I have always come from elsewhere, my geometry so obvious that as soon as we met she was blinded, wished herself oblivion. I have shaped myself careful, to be here inside both myths and free. We walk in the park, a grandmother hiding the sharpness of her teeth, and her red-cloaked daughter pushing a concrete poetic, ancestral shades making a desperate effort to combine into a single unit called family, as if that could not be raised by the thunderous roar of homes breaking. Placing her back in the careful layers of her sheltered nest, I am a cuckoo chick, demolishing all her certainties, walking away beyond her sightline to soar. Bindweed. Every time I find you embracing someone else, I rip your body to abstraction, number of shreds unknown. I cast you like a curse, cauldron flung, into rusted metal buckets that wear patina like scars. Sometimes I am uglier than you realise, a witch who delights in gathering bliss in her own shape, treats native vigour like divine catastrophe, always afraid of what real mildness might do. Speedwell. One day when you are struggling and it all seems too much, this will be a gift waiting. It will not be what you expect. Gifts always work differently, giving what you really need. Stop. It is here, underfoot. See that speck of brightest blue, next to your boot toe, about to be trodden? It is an angel's eye. Raise your foot gently. Find a new equilibrium elsewhere. Attend the speedwell, a quiet messenger scrutinising you. Say something, anything. If you are not used to conversing with flowers, you could begin with simple greetings. Try, hello. Do not talk about the weather. It knows more law than you ever will. Some days it will give you the sky. Others, a chink of the delft bowl churched high on your grandmother's thou shalt not touch shelf. When you look, wealth is always waiting, not in the grandness of gestures or coins flashing bright as the flare of a guttered flame, but fastened tentatively to this moment, holding our gaze. Japanese knotweed was originally fixed in meaning as ornamental, now translated to so alive it is a problem. A wellspring sent in vagrant shoots, suppression an assured speciality with an insistence of substance. Through each leaf forming, in every tendril flex and stretch, we sound the word invasive. A clandestine operation to occupy spaces, like secrets we all carry. A desolate freedom, advancing, resolute.
Elizabeth Barton makes a welcome return to Poetry Worth Hearing with 2 poems.
A refusal to despair. I will not lie on a rack of ash and sackcloth, turn the hate of my worst enemy against myself. I will not welt my flesh with thoughts of snubs, defeats, 1,000 small disgraces. This pain's not holy. It's time to burn this goat's hair shirt, this wire cilice that bites into my thigh. Instead, I'll wear a garter laced with bluebells, a gown of hawthorn blossom, taste the champagne of the finch's song. Briar rose breaks free. I sickened of my gauzy bed, gagged on honeysuckle, jasmine. Bats thrummed in my ears. I longed to shrug them off, shut out the moon's mad muttering. But I was chained in fear. I lay so still, a gold crest nested in my hair. My skin paled with rime of lichen, spiders' webs, and yet I burned, my blood so hot it singed the pearly wings of moths. I cried for help, but you, my prince, were in no state to save a maiden in distress, and so I ripped my shroud, tore my cuffs of ivy, thrashed through thorns until my shins and fingers bled. A blackbird warned, "There's no way out." But I was stubborn and had teeth to bite.
Sarah J. Bryson's first poem also uses the natural world to address another very real form of struggle. Her second poem is part of her ongoing sequence about training as a nurse.
Flower fairies of the spring. We walk out down the lane towards the quarry, Mother and I, noticing that spring has arrived in abundance, with goosegrass, or is it sticky willy? There are sweet violets, dandelions and stinging nettles, plus dead nettles, purple and white. She tells me of the poems from her childhood, flower fairies of the spring. Along the canal banks there's lady smock and butterbur, plus young leaves of dock. We point them out to each other. Remember these, she says, in case of stings. Look closely to find the ground ivy, though it's not ivy at all, with its violet funnelled flowers. And under the trees, wood anemones nearly over, and bluebells nearly out. Primroses and cowslips along the verges, plus some early cow parsley, or more prettily named Queen Anne lace, and greater stitchwork with its deeply notched petals. Don't forget the forget-me-not, she says. An upright plant in fresh green and white stands waiting to be named, but the name escapes her just now, being on the tip of her tongue. As we come back up the lane, the light is fading into dusk. The light sky behind is tinged with sunset and the air is chillier. Time to get home for tea, we decide, striding a little faster. We see that the daisies on the green have decided it's time to close for the night, have wrapped up to shutter their yellow centres, exposing the pink undersides of their petals. They are the day's eyes, she says. As we come in, the cat asks for her food, wraps herself about our legs. I put on the kettle and start to cook, while Mum sits at the kitchen table. Jack by the hedge, she says suddenly. I remembered. After night shift. I weigh up the cost of a taxi against missing the train, the thought of the queue at the ticket office, the idea of running for the bus with the bag banging against my legs. The taxi wins. The driver lifts the hastily stuffed bag as if filled only with balloons, asks, "What time's the train, love?" Then rally-style drives into town through the Marston Ferry Link Road queues with me in the back, heart bouncing. At the station I rush to buy my ticket. I need to get this one. I mustn't keep Dad waiting. My body clock is still on night shift. I worry I may fall asleep, miss my stop. I find an empty compartment and take the window seat. I watch the stations go by. Charlbury, Morton-in-Marsh. The countryside is mesmeric, makes my tired eyes slip into jagged nystagmus. Not long now to Worcester Shrub Hill. He's there, the engine running. Then it's the drive back for a whole week of home, of someone else carrying the can, a whole week of being the child again.
Helen Overell gives us the struggle of process in two very different guises.
Absence. Take a stick of charcoal between finger and thumb. Place flat on the paper. now sweep in great stuttered arcs over the page until all is dark. Look at the slow struggle of starlight through patches of uneven infill. See how the understated grain in pulped white holds a skitter of crumbs, brittle and black, branch and bowl unconsumed. Smooth with cloth cut from an old worn-out cotton t-shirt. Fold this into a wedge, so as to ease away carbon depths, tease out grayscale gradations. Make highlights, watch form emerge. Day take shape from shadow. Absence give rise to presence as clear as the imprint of a handclasp. The Duck's Tale. What can I have been thinking to lay so far from water? Anyway, the clutch hatched, all 11, damp dandelions, yolk-fed, pipsqueak loud. We set off at once across the dry, spiky land. You should have seen us, me waddling ahead, a line of lookalikes following after, my deep calls keeping them in order. Of course, there were pauses. There's always one who lags behind, stutters panic. The rest join in. We wait until the gap closes, carry on in single file. United, we stand a chance. They know that from first struggle with shellbreak. We reached the flat stones, the ground uneasy, the waddlets keeping up as best they could, when a great flurry passed us, tall, hurrying, just near the long grass behind those awkward holes, a mere hop-over for me. The littles threaded through, took an age. The cool soothed my feet. The earth shuddered now, enough to ruffle feathers. The next step, the dark river that roars, breathes tailspin, swallows flight whole, not the best part of the journey. We unhuddled. The brave hearts followed my lead, ready for anything, bold as daybreak. That is when the angel walked before us, flapping huge wings, bright as the sun, all anyhow. The rushed air slowed to a trickle. The world stood still, muttered. We set out, hot foot for the other side, not one lost. The last lap was meadow filled with buttercups, the scent of water, the ease of swim, the youngsters bobbing round me. Oh, his eyes were kind.
The last poem in this open submission section comes from Kate Young. Texts of poems and information on the poets can be found at poetryworthhearing.biz.
Ascension. You have a mountain to climb. The diagnosis of the specialist, his words perched on a cliff edge. She takes the word mountain from the ha in her mind and rolls it around her tongue. It tastes sharp, like the knife that carves the scoop of her womb from the scarp of tissue and bone. So begins the rocky recovery, toe by toe, determined to reach the bruised peak of her frailty. The rucksack is filled with stone, slowing her ascent to a crawl as she hauls herself, crag by crag, in the long drag to the summit, a million grains of granite shaping her into a ghost. She appears in the cloud, a speck of life in the shroud of Nevis, her smile as wide as a glen.
Michael Bartholomew-Biggs is known to many as a poet and poetry editor of the online magazine London Grip. Here he reads a selection from his recent book, Identified Flying Objects.
Well, I'm very grateful to Kathleen for this chance to share some poems from my new collection, Identified Flying Objects. The poems in the book are all linked to quotes from the biblical prophet Ezekiel, who was writing for and about people struggling with the pain of being captives and exiles in a foreign land in Babylon. The first poem is about feeling alienated, even in familiar surroundings. Internal exile. 2 ways to learn you don't belong in Babylon. The first, most obvious. Somebody drags you there with all your neighbours, puts you on a reservation where there's shade enough and water. Your exhibits, though the fact that you've been collected matters more than who you are. Spectators sometimes watch and prod you for amusement, but your repertoire of zoo songs has been lost along with all your other playthings thrown among the bushes. Trees above your head ooze misery like honeydew. It sticks to you. Dust sticks to it. In grubby secrecy you plot appalling retribution for your kidnappers. The second starts at home. You realise your neighbours are establishing a Babylon around you, disciplining grass you left unmown last year. They're planting borders in, they say, the proper way, replacing new varieties of fruiting bush with hedges and a maze that only they can thread. You learn you never knew them, nor do they know you. They talk of building walls and towers, flagpoles, flags, above an avenue of statues. You suggest the ground won't bear their weight. They try to drown you out by bellowing, dead-eyed, an old song of denial. Ezekiel didn't only speak his prophecies, sometimes he performed them as well. Once he lay down in the public square for days on end, acting out the impending siege of Jerusalem using clay models. In this poem I've transferred him to the City of London to issue unheeded warnings to the financial masters of the universe. Street Theatre. He wonders why his precious flesh remains unbruised beside the gutters of Barbican, where he's laid himself down and kept extended silence. He remembers sighing when he acquiesced to wearing shackles as a wider warning of impending penalties. Black axioms are hidden in the pockets of dark suits on money men who must step round him. As they do, far more of them ignore him than will meet his eyes or scan his dumb show doomsday tokens. Amid the mud he is meticulous to promise no more than he knows and threaten nothing less. No softening of his position is permitted to trip up passers-by and overturn their bland indifference to sewage stink and wet corruption clinging to their ankles. He marvels that his holy bones can still hold together in his fragile carcass. In our time, there's an ongoing and unequal struggle between the rich and powerful 1% who can influence governments all the time, and the other 99% of us who, if we're lucky, get consulted every 5 years or so. The next poem is inspired by Michel Lalonde's angry French-Canadian poem from the 1970s called Speak White. It protests about the dominance of the English-speaking minority in Quebec province, but the sentiments could also apply to the suppression of language by any dominant group. My poem, Speak Wealth, is about how the use of financial language infects everyone with the narrow, acquisitive attitudes of the money men. Speak wealth. Let this be your language now. Hold forth on offshore holdings. Rhapsodize on themed investments. make us song and dance about financial instruments. Speak wealth so we can overhear you or get the media to tell us of your newest acquisition, your most recent self-indulgence. We get by on smaller change, the sort that fits in off-peak meters, slot machines or gaps in floorboards. We must juggle obligations as we walk the fraying wire stretched between each pair of paydays. This makes us proficient in precarious arithmetic. Speak wealth and it can sound like scripture. After all, the Bible says, to those who have shall more be given. But we have-nots aren't exempt from losing even what we have. We're confident this verse endorses your strong views on market forces. Oddly though, it fails to mention trickle-down. That's your invention, since another scripture states, you'll always have the poor with you. The plight of the struggling poor troubled another more recent prophetic figure, the poet William Blake. And the next poem starts with a vision of angels that Blake had as a boy on Peckham Rye. A boy believes in angels up an oak tree on the way to Croydon. That's okay. What's to disbelieve when curtains cutting off this world from any others are thin as yellow skeletons of autumn leaves? Nature's drapes and angel wings look pretty much the same and spread or fold as fleetingly as sparkle shimmers flash across our eyes when low sun strikes a window pane. He looks out now through pity's casement. Cold wind blows across the common, scatters morning's opportunities beyond the reach of any small blue hands not plunged in hollow pockets or clasped round chests and tucked in armpits of a worn-out crumpled jacket left unwanted, like its wearer, underneath a hedge. My final poem moves on to personal and emotional struggles. This imagined account of a troubled relationship links two unrelated facts. The first is that on April the 5th, 1916, a Zeppelin was shot down over the Thames estuary and came ashore at Margate. And the second is that T.S. Eliot and his wife stayed for a while in Margate in 1921. Connecting with the wreck. While Tom's elsewhere, she shops for curios. One day she finds a wartime postcard of an airship shot down and then washed up on nearby sands. She sees the tangled girder mess in tattered fabric as both prophecy and parody of her shattered shabby marriage. Awkward limbs at scarecrow angles, two cold souls half wrapped in bed sheets. Her heart was never rightly put together. Leaky valves let hope escape, so buoyancy is lost, and she is often overcome by tight-clenched fears, especially in bed at night. And is it self-importance or hot air that keeps his skin so taut? If that were burned away by shame, his suit would hide a blackened skeleton. She guesses there were bodies stiff as his discovered in the airship's wreck, but she identifies with chilled survivors clinging to a broken structure, drifting with the flotsam till picked up by enemies. Is capture while escaping with one's life good luck or bad? She isn't sure if she'd prefer a prison to a headstone. She imagines how the empty hulk was tethered, taken under tow, then hauled offshore, cut free and left to founder. After one brief surge, the placid ocean would have pulled itself together as if nothing of importance had occurred. She wishes she could replicate that makeshift mix of burial at sea and clean annulment. And that brings me to the end of my recorded reading. Thank you all very much for listening.
And that's the end of Poetry Worth Hearing, episode 23. I hope you enjoyed listening.